We're back in the Trophy Ridge booth here at ATA, and our good brother Samuel Soholt has sat down with us.
Yes.
Today.
I'm happy to be here.
What are you?
I did like how you said we're back in the booth. You never left.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We actually did a podcast like 2 minutes ago, and I've moved from Greg's chair to this one. Yeah.
No, it's good to be here.
Yeah, brother. How's the show going so far?
The show's good. You know, it's for me. The first time I ever came was with you guys in 2000. I guess it would have been 2012, right? Yeah,
Yep.
January 2012.
Yeah.
And it was so overwhelming that first time coming here. You know, all the people and just all the companies and walking around and looking at stuff that you only see in catalogs. But over the years, and then I went to freelance photography, and so coming to these shows was pretty stressful, like trying to, get business and talk to marketing people and whatever. And then since I've been able to, kind of get a career going in the photography industry, mostly I use the show to come back and shake hands with all the people I've worked with and, maybe a few potential that I want to work with in the future. But it's mostly like, hey, guys, I still exist. All right, I'm out.
Yeah, you're a seasoned vet now.
Yeah. Was it hard to believe it's 2019?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Started out 2011. You were an intern.
Yep.
Yeah, we all worked at Midwest Whitetail together.
Yep.
That year.
2011. That was a good year.
Think about that, Logan.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago now, huh?
Yeah, you're some old man.
Yeah, you're an intern now and been at this. This is your first ATA show, right?
Yeah, first
Yeah.
one.
And what do you think?
It's definitely overwhelming.
It's huge.
But we're getting you connected with some people.
Yeah.
It's
been
introducing you to some people.
It's been real good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sam, in general, what have you been up to the last 7-8 years? Because you talked about having a career in the photography
Yes.
industry, but what does that entail?
Yeah. So 2011 was the start.
Started from scratch, everybody,
yes,
by
yep.
the way, that asks all the time, how do I get into this industry and
Yeah,
stuff?
I did not go to school for it. I was actually, when I was at Midwest Whitetail, I was finishing up my master's in business at North Dakota State. I had one online class to finish, so I was still in school doing the internship. So that was the beginning. And I actually had a professional video camera when I came into the internship, but that was only because I had had some interest in filming before, which Jared Mills and Drew Yarkowski almost broke because they they took it out and filmed in a rainstorm. And then it took like 6 weeks for the screen to finally dry out. But that was a long time ago. Anyway, yeah, so 2011 was the start, and then I moved to Colorado and was helping my brother run his backcountry hunting store. And while I was doing that, I was making like product overview videos, and I learned all of that from working with you guys at Midwest Whitetail. Learned how to edit, learned how to produce, learned just like different shots and kind of the basics. And then was hired by a sales rep. He owned a sales rep agency, and met him through the store, and he hired me to be a sales rep in Montana. So I took a job, moved to Bozeman, had 19 different lines of hunting and fishing gear, and was traveling around Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, selling, everything from AR-10s and AR-15s to fly fishing reels. But that didn't last super long. It was a fairly new agency, and they couldn't pay me anything other than commission.
Right.
And so I was actually doing a fairly good job of selling, but a lot of the companies we worked with couldn't keep up with the demand. And so I only got paid when stuff shipped. And so my commission checks weren't as big as I would as they needed to be for me to stay alive. So one day I happened to be I was at Starbucks inside of a Safeway, and a guy next to me was on the phone talking about a video project.
Oh, dude, I remember this.
Yeah, and I was like, he got up and he was on the phone, and then he sat back down and got off the phone, and I was like, well, what kind of video are you working on? And he's like, oh, I'm doing this thing for the Natural History Museum here in town, but the main thing I do is I produce a hunting show. And I was like, oh, no kidding, I just got done, working on a hunting show. And we exchanged contact information, and he actually helped me. I was like, I'm trying to sell my video camera right now. Like, I got a DSLR. I'm moving into that direction. And he's like, oh, just go post it at the film school, and like in Bozeman there. And I sold it within a day. So I, reached out. I was like, hey, man, thanks for the tip on that. I sold the camera right away. That's going to allow me to eat for the next 2 months. So that's exciting. And then 2 weeks later, he sent me a message and was like, hey, man, like, have you ever run a Sony EX1? And you, Aaron, had a EX1 back in the day, and so I had run one. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And he's like, all right, I need a second shooter on a bear hunt in Alaska. He's like, you want to go? I was like, yes. So, we flew up to Alaska. I filmed a bear hunt for Steve West and Steve's Outdoor Adventures. And then through that, made another connection. And it was like a month later, I was on a flight to Kodiak to film Coast Guard Alaska for from mid-July until the end of November.
Pretty sweet, huh, Logan?
That sounds fun.
For the Discovery Channel?
So that one was the Coast Guard Alaska was for the Weather Channel.
Okay.
So I worked for Al Roker for a little bit.
No kidding.
My checks were signed by Al Roker Entertainment.
That's awesome.
And then while I was on Kodiak, some people from the History Channel were doing casting, and this woman walked into where we were staying and was like, hey, we're looking for people to film for this new show we're doing. It's a bear hunting show. And then I met the producer, and I was like, hey, I'm doing this Weather Channel thing, but my forte is filming hunts. If you need a guy that understands hunting and out filming the guide and the clients or whatever, let me know. And they had an open spot, so I became a shooter for the History Channel for a month and was bouncing around on little bush planes and boats and whatever, and trying to hunt Kodiaks for 30 days.
That's awesome.
Which was great. We never shot one. Nobody ever. I filmed for 30 days straight on brown bears on Kodiak, and nobody ever shot one.
How many did you film?
Filmed probably 10 or 12, but just nothing close enough or nothing big enough.
Sure.
Yeah. But then from that, the last hunt that I was on. Sorry, this is kind of getting to be a long story.
No, this is great.
I'll speed it up once we get into it. But on the last hunt that I filmed for the History Channel, I met a guy. I met the owner of Timney Triggers. He was the client on the hunt. And his best bud was Chris Ellis, and Chris was a PR guy for Remington Firearms and Timney. And we got to know each other, and at this point I had my Canon 7D, and which is a funny story of how I acquired that, but I traded the bow that I bought for Midwest Whitetail for a Colt AR-15, which I then sold and paid for a Canon 7D. So turns out if you want it bad enough, you can get yourself a camera. So I met Chris Ellis, and I had shot a bunch of photos on that bear hunt and gave them to those guys, and he was like, man, some of this is pretty good stuff. He's like, do you shoot for anybody else? And I was like, nah, I've only done filming. And he's like, well, we've got a bunch of these new product seminars, and what we do is we fly in 30 writers for all the gun magazines, and they test the new products. The problem is none of them get good photos because they're trying to shoot the guns, take notes about how they feel about the gun, and then we want them to shoot photos of themselves shooting the gun, and everybody's passing around cell phones. He's like, it's a total cluster. So would you be interested in being hired to come and shoot photos of all the writers using the products, and then they can use them for their articles? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I think they hired me for 4 or 5 product seminars, and that was my first professional photo shoot. Was a new product seminar in Southern Arizona, for whatever new gun Remington was coming out with at the time.
Nice. What year?
That was.
Do you remember?
Yeah, that was the end of 2013,
okay.
December 2013, and so then I met a bunch of writers and was doing doing some stuff for Remington, and I was at the time was reaching out to a bunch of different companies trying to drum up some business. And I met the editor of Peterson's Hunting Magazine at a product seminar in West Virginia, and I had put together a portfolio into a PDF that I could send people so they could see some of my work, and I sent him the PDF, and he really liked the work, and so I got a call from Mike Scobie and Ben O'Brien was the managing editor at Peterson's at the time, and they're like, hey, we're sending Joe Rogan on a moose hunt in British Columbia. Do you have any interest in going and shooting the cover photo for the next this hunt to eat or eat what you kill movement that Peterson's kind of broadcast everywhere? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so next thing I knew, I was on a plane up to BC and was in the woods with Rogan for a week and Ben O'Brien, and Joe ended up shooting a tiny moose, and he was jacked about it. I think the exact words were dry, it was late in the season, so we were doing a lot of cut block glassing. So we drive to one and glass and drive to one and glass and call, and we're driving, and the guide goes, well, there's a bull. And we're all just like joking in the truck, and we're like, oh, where? And everyone freaks out. And the guy goes, it's not very big. And Joe's like, I don't give a
Here we go.
so then we get out and scramble down the ditch and like move up over and like get into position, and he just, shoots this thing at whatever 100 yards in the woods, and then it was just high fives and celebration and meat, and then that's where that photo with Rogan holding the big moose quarter on his shoulder came from.
Classic.
Yep. So that was kind of the start of it all. Like, that's what really launched it, and then from there it's just been networking and contacts, and one step after another. Each job leads to the next.
Packing and unpacking and packing.
Packing and unpacking and packing. I haven't had a permanent residence since coming up on 5 years. I haven't
Living
had
the nomad lifestyle.
Yes. So any of you out there that are aspiring freelance photographers, just know that it can be done. You just have to be willing to never really live a settled life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're
But
always somewhere else.
It was at the right time in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not married.
Not married,
Young.
no kids, young. Really had, I always, in the back of my head, I'm like, well, if I fall flat on my face, I can get a job. I mean, somebody will hire me, I hope.
Able-bodied man.
Yeah, that's right. At the very, I got my degree, so I have a college degree. Like, I figured that I can always go get a job if I needed a job to pay for everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Maybe you can finish your story a little bit, because we haven't got to the public land bus yet.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you hunted with Rogan, took a kind of a classic cover shot of him with the moose quarter.
Yep. And then from there, it was, just networking and staying in contact with people and getting hired for different photo jobs. So did a lot of work with Sitka, a lot of work with Yeti, a lot of work with Onyx Maps, and a few other brands that have, we have a really good relationship, and they've sent me on trips, and for Yeti, going on ambassador trips and shooting all the photos and whatever else. So that was kind of like the segue, kind of built my career on just building relationships and then having like a core group of people that I shoot for. Yes, and then that leads to the bus. So I think it was even before the Rogan trip, my brother and I and his business partner had been sitting around and just kind of hanging out, and it'd be like a great vehicle for like doing like a big turkey tour would be a bus. It's like pretty good clearance, tons of room to sleep, rip all the seats out, throw some bunk beds in. We can do like 12 states and just knock down turkeys for, we're all laughing, we're coming up with ideas for it or whatever. And
Oh yeah, you called years ago and we're like, hey,
I'm
what
gonna buy
about
this bus.
I'm like, that's freaking dope. Like, that's gonna be awesome.
Yep. And so obviously none of us ever bought a bus. And years go by, but like every time I'd see a school bus, it'd be like, oh, look, you start like eyeing down a yellow school bus. Like, there's something wrong with me. Towards the end of the season in 2016, I was just kind of hanging out, kind of looking for like the next project. Like, what am I going to do? Moving forward, like, what am I going to do? And that bus idea just kept coming back up. And finally I was like, you know what? At this point, I was 29. I was like, I'm going to turn 30 this year. If I look back on my life and if I never did it, if I never bought the bus, did the bill,
Right.
do the thing, like, I'm going to always regret not taking the plunge and just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'll do it. And if it's great, it's great. If it's not, at least I still did it.
Got a good story.
Yeah.
And a bus.
And a bus, yeah. So I started looking on Craigslist in different spots. I actually thought I had a bus bought in Iowa. And I was like, okay,
Nice.
I'll be there in 2 weeks to pick it up. And he's like, I kind of got this other guy that might buy it. So he ended up selling it to another guy.
Huh.
And then my brother found the bus that I bought south of him in Colorado, in Fort Lupton. And I contacted that guy, and I was like, do you need cash, or do you want gear? Like, do you want to trade? Can we do a little bit of both? And he's like, well, what do you got? And so I just like put together a list, like he had it listed for like $5,500. So it was like guns and coolers and clothing and like whatever. And he's like, I don't really need this. I don't really need this.
Yeah.
And I kind of just wore him down. And I think he got tired of dealing with me. He's like, all right, I'll take $5,000 in gear or $3,500 cash. And I was like, sold. Cash.
Yeah.
So New Year's Eve 2016, I drove down, gave him $3,500 cash, and drove a bus. Drove a bus back to my brother's place in Colorado. And then it sat behind my brother's shop in Colorado until April. And in that time, I had been able to get out there, and he helped me rip the seats out. I pulled the heaters out that run back towards the back of the bus, and just got it all cleaned out, ripped the flooring out. And so it was down just to the plywood. And then I had it down to the plywood. And then in April, I drove it from Colorado back to South Dakota to do the build because my parents told me that I could park it at their lake place, stay there for the summer, and do the build if I wanted to do it back at home. And I was, yeah, absolutely. So drove it back, and then during this whole time, I'm running around at the shows telling people that I bought a bus, trying to get funding, to try to help people like pitch in and, do this big project surrounding public lands, and got a lot of people fired up that first year, and I ended up self-funding the whole thing.
Right.
So, yep, because sometimes people get excited at one show, and then when it comes time to pay that bill, it doesn't happen. So I was like, you know what? I'm already this far in. I'm doing
You're
it
like,
for
screw
myself.
it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yep.
That's good advice, people. If you're listening,
Yeah.
just
At some point, I think a lot of people get to a point where it gets really hard and really scary, and then they quit and they go do something else. But if you can push through that spot, a lot of times it doesn't take much more to get it over the top.
Yep.
So yeah, that first I took it back home, and then Memorial Day weekend was the first time I ever actually worked on the bus, getting it going. And my buddy and I painted the ceiling, and then I had bought the floor, and so painted the ceiling, put the flooring down, and started building the furniture that Memorial Day weekend. And then from Memorial Day weekend of 2017 until August 7th of 2017 was basically wake up, make a pot of coffee, walk out to the bus, start hammering. And I was like, every board that I get done today is one less that I have to do tomorrow.
that's right.
So I it honestly
Sam Soholt Bus Renovations LLC.
It honestly went super fast. In the initial stages went really fast. Painted the ceiling, got the floor down, built all the framework for the furniture. I had that done by June 6th. So it was the first 8 days or whatever. I had a bunch knocked out, and then all the finish work starts, and it's all the little tedious stuff. At what inch do I need to have the bunk beds away from the back of the bus so then I can build the framework for my actual bed, and you start to play with all that, and it gets tedious. But yeah, I just stayed after it and had most of it done by early August, and then I think it was August 9th or something like that. I took off on the first trip, was heading west to go antelope hunt. So from
What else do you do? Do you sleep? As a habit?
Yeah. I've made that I do that a part-time thing. It's like a hobby. Yeah.
So the public land bus.
Yeah.
And you documented that process on your Instagram?
Yep. Yeah. So did most of that build through my Instagram story.
It's really cool to see this all come together.
Yeah. And I should have done more actual filming of it, just to have for myself. But I figured the majority of the people really wanted to see the finished product, and even if they had little snippets of the build, that was good enough. So I didn't have anybody else with me, so trying to film it as well, and get stuff done would have been a challenge. But yeah, I did the whole thing on my Instagram story, just updates through the whole thing, and then the reasoning behind the bus was at the same time that I bought the bus was right around the 2016 election, and a lot of legislation was kind of in the works to start to remove our public lands, or they had done a good job marketing it as a states' rights issue and transferring federally managed lands back to the states because the states can do a better job managing it. And I agree with that to an extent, but they can't afford it. And so I wanted to help do my part as a sportsman and making our voices heard as far as keeping public lands in public hands and keeping those places open for future generations, because guys like me and everybody sitting at this table can't do what we do without those places to go do that. So
it was a cool project and a great cause. Advocacy and education about public lands.
Yeah. So got the bus built, took off on the tour, and then had worked a deal with Outdoor Life where they were going to, I was going to produce X number of videos for them, and then they were going to push them out through their social channels to kind of bring awareness to it. And so I did that and self-filmed that whole first fall. My buddy Sean did the edits for me, and then in December Outdoor Life put that out, and then that's what really gave the bus traction was those million views or whatever over the course of a few months on their stuff was really when the bus came to the forefront in the hunting industry.
So what kind of crazy nomadic stories do you have? Like what's the craziest crap that's happened?
I'm trying to think of like weird stories. I haven't had a whole lot of really weird stuff happen.
Well,
You're lucky.
How about near death then? Because you've been in Alaska.
Yeah,
You've been
I've had some. I had some pretty. So I got called out on when I was working for the Coast Guard, or that show. We would go out on SARS, search and rescues, and so I probably went out on about a dozen of them, and all of them that I went on actually either got called off or rerouted, or something else would happen where we wouldn't find like who we were looking for. But the worst was there was one day I'm sitting in the cabin or whatever where we lived with the producer, and the pager goes off, and so we call and make sure it's a real SAR, and we rip in there, and I throw my dry suit on, and it's probably at this point it's blowing pretty consistent winds at 50 to 60 and raining and gusting up to the weather gets nasty up there, and so I throw my dry suit on and helmet and run out to the helicopter, and I'm sitting in there waiting for the rest of the crew, and it wasn't like a super urgent thing. There was just a beacon that was going off, and they didn't know if it was an actual SOS beacon or something that got tripped or whatever, and so we were going to go fly a grid pattern over by Homer, and I get in the helicopter, and the flight mechanic comes over. Can I swear on the podcast? Okay.
Yeah.
So a flight mechanic comes over, and he goes, "How long you been flying with us?" And I was like, "Oh, since July." I think it was October at this point. And he's got a big contractor trash bag, and he throws it at me, and he goes, "You're gonna need this. It's gonna be bumpy." And I was like, "All right." So we get all loaded up. We take off. We fly over to where we're doing the grid pattern, and helicopters are awesome, but they're not great in bad weather. Like, they're just moving a lot. So we're flying around doing the grid pattern. And it's not too bad. And the pilot goes, "Hey, can you guys see that water blowing off the ocean down there?" And, like you get like the big tornado swirl of like mist or whatever. I'm like, "Yeah, we see it." And he's like, "So that's a minimum of 55 knots that it takes of wind to blow that water up off the waves like that."
Wow.
And, we're all like, "Oh man, that's crazy." He's like, "Yeah, we're going to try to avoid some of that, wind." And the sentence had no sooner come out of his mouth than the whole helicopter does a big 90-degree twist. Whoa. And just drops probably 100 feet like down. And in my mind I'm just freaking out.
Yeah.
I look back, flight mechanic's back there like just doing his thing, whatever, radioing into people or whatever, and or not the flight mechanic, but guy's back there dealing with the dials, and then the rescue swimmer's back there with his feet crossed, eating gushers, like completely calm, no problem. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal. So helicopter climbs back up to altitude, going back and forth, and again, 90-degree twist, just boom, drops, and so everyone just stayed calm, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess apparently that was no big deal. So after about 45 minutes, we land to get fuel to go back to base. And we get out, and at this point, it has now turned into this most gorgeous day. Sun's out, calm, whatever, and we get down and land and get out of the helicopter, stretch out a little bit, and the rescue swimmer goes, "Oh, man, I thought we were done."
And he's like, "No big deal." Just going through the motions.
I'm assuming,
they know not to talk about it in the middle of it.
Right. If it happens, it happens, and then you deal with it. Yeah.
So you probably have to have that kind of demeanor to be able to
be able to deal with it. Yeah, and then every time you get in a helicopter, all they talk about is, and nothing is like how good the mission's going to go. It's everything they talk about is like, if this goes wrong, this happens. If this goes wrong, if this happens. If you fall in the water and you're wearing this, you die in 12 minutes instead of 6. But yeah, so that was I didn't really know how close we were to something really bad happening.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. So where do you reside most of the time nowadays?
It's an excellent question. Most of the time I spend in the Dakotas.
Yep.
My fiance is in grad school in Grand Forks. Grew up in South Dakota, grew up in Sioux Falls, and then my parents have a place that they let me crash at up in northern South Dakota when I'm not on the road in the bus. So, and then so most of the time back in the Dakotas, and then when fall hits, it's it's anybody's guess.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But
You're
this,
just all
thi-
over- How does
life
she-
is changing. Like you said, you got a fiance.
that's
How's
right.
that
Yeah.
work?
How's what work? Fiance?
How do you have a fiance that you never see?
I asked and she said yes. I think that I think that's the trick. Like I haven't seen her enough for her to get to know me all that well. No, it's great. She when we first started dating, I was already in this life.
Yeah.
And so I was gone. I mean, was gone, am gone all the time. And then I just make sure that I make time to get back and see her as much as possible. That's pretty much how that works.
Yeah.
So I spend extra money on plane tickets and driving and whatever, but it's it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, man. It's your truth, dude.
Yep.
Like this is just
Yep.
this is
This
how
is, this is what I do.
this is how you roll.
Yep.
You like to be nomadic and just cruise around and chase adventure.
Yeah,
It's
I
pretty
mean,
dope.
I think at someday, like, I definitely want to keep the adventures going, but on a little bit more like focused, like schedule instead of like life is just one giant adventure. Like maybe I'll do one 10-day adventure a month. That's enough. Growing up, like I would look at my dad and my uncle and everyone that was like, oh man, they're just like hunting, like hunting gods, because they got us into it, and you just look up to them so much. And then we're in deer camp this year, and both my dad and my uncle were like, you've hunted more in the last 2 years than the both of us combined hunted our entire childhood. But
Found out what you wanted to do and did it.
that's right. But yeah, so my dad grew up in Wisconsin, archery hunted, rifle hunted, and archery hunted a lot, and then duck hunted when he went to school in North Dakota. And then when we were all born, he pretty much gave up archery hunting for like 20 years. And when I was really little, we upland hunted. And when I getting a little older, we started to duck hunt. And then we went full in on waterfowl. I mean, it was, we had 9 duck boats. We have 30 dozen floating mallard decoys. I mean, you name it. It was just, we had everything. But yeah. And then my brother wanted to learn how to elk hunt. So he chose school in Wyoming. He learned how to elk hunt.
Solid choice.
Yep. And then I went out and filmed him and his buddy on a hunt. Drove back and bought a bow the next day. And that was like a year before I came down to Midwest Whitetail. So
Right.
bought a bow,
Nice.
shot a couple deer, was all fired up. And then I was so excited about hunting after I had shot a couple deer within like a 10-day span during the rut that I just started cold calling hunting shows. And that's how I got in touch with Bill.
Yeah.
I just a friend of mine had sent me one of the episodes, and I was like, oh, I wonder if those guys ever look for interns. And so I emailed Bill, and he emailed back like within an hour. I was like, yeah, we're always looking for interns. And I drove down and
You drove a long way down.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drove
Didn't
from.
you meet him in a subway for like
Well,
10 minutes?
Yep. I was back in Sioux Falls for kind of Christmas break, and then I drove down and stayed. No, I drove all the way from Sioux Falls that morning. Drove down, came into the shop, and he's like, oh, let's go get some lunch. And then we went to Subway, talked for a few minutes, and he's like, all right, we'll let you know. And then, he kind of made it seem like that it was going to work out, that
Yeah,
I was going to
right.
get hired. But
Yeah.
I think I met you briefly in the shop, and
Wasn't a lot of people around at that
not a lot of
point.
people around.
Yeah, Greg was flying solo in there for
Yep,
a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, got the job and then moved down in August. Let's tell some stories about
Yeah.
when we were all together.
That's true. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. we
Oh,
had-
you were climbing a tree one time.
Yes. Oh, there's a near
Here's
death
a
experience.
good safety
Yeah. Yeah.
reminder.
A reminder. Yeah. So it hasn't changed. I always had the feeling that like the deeper in you go in a spot, like the better the hunting's going to be. So of course I make Drew Yarkowski follow me in like 2 miles into the middle of nowhere in a giant tree. That the access is great because you get to get into this little ditch, and then you walk down the ditch, and the ditch gets deeper as you go. And then when you get to the base of the tree, the first screw-in step went into one of the roots in the side of the ditch. The next one went into the root at the base of the tree. And then
I remember.
yeah, you filmed in there one day. Yep.
I've hunted in there a bunch.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we go in there, and Drew's with me. I scouted the spot. I put out a camera, and we had a pretty good deer on camera. So go in. Drew puts in all the steps, throws the safety line up, and then I go up to hang the stands and then haul everything up. So he hangs the steps, gets the safety line up. I clip on, climb up, and hang the first stand. And I'm getting into the first stand to hang the second stand, and there was a giant branch off the side of the tree. 8 to 10 inch branch.
Mm-hmm.
And I put weight on it to move around the tree, and that branch just, the whole thing busts off, and it's pitch black. And this thing drops, and I drop like out of the stand and catch on the safety line, and was able to reach to another branch above myself and hold on to it. But the branch, it's like 30 feet to the bottom of that ditch. And and Drew's down there in the dark, looking up at me. So the branch breaks, and at this point we had been super, super quiet, getting in there. The branch breaks, and it's going right to him, and I go, look out, and it landed on top of my backpack with your camera inside of it.
Yeah.
But luckily it was all dead rot, didn't break the camera.
Right.
After that, I was like, are you okay? And he's like, yep. Are you okay? I was like, yep. Then I'll get back into the stand and then hauled the other one up and hung it and hunted in there. But, man, yeah, clip into your safe
Always
line.
be attached to that tree.
Yeah,
man.
that is, because that would have been, that was a long way to the bottom of that ditch.
Dude. We should tell that one about when you killed that buck with Mike.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
To my knowledge, that's one of the few hunts I've ever seen where two guys actually doubled up on bucks in the rut.
Yeah.
On film.
Yeah. So nobody's going to believe this, but so Mike Sawyer and I had been hunting together for a couple days, and kind of the deal was that if Mike's hunting on Bill's farm, the camera guy takes a bow with in case there's a mature buck that Mike doesn't want to shoot. And so, of course, I jumped all over that opportunity because, we'd all been hunting hard, and I was like, well, if there's any opportunity, this is a good one. So, but the night before this went down, we were at Muddy had thrown a big party, and there was a big bonfire.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about it, and we had both said, you know what? Tomorrow morning, we're going back into the poison ivy stand. We're going to double. We called it at the bonfire, and we go in, get it in this tree, and because it was somebody got poison ivy from that. It was covered in poison ivy.
Yeah,
the whole tree.
Hence the name.
Hence the name. Yeah. And then whoever put in the steps put them in very far apart.
But it's Bill. Bill's the lankiest dude ever, man.
I think Mike did those too. No, I guess Mike kind of complained about some of those. I'm sure it was Bill. 6'5". It was.
Yeah. But anyway, we're way up in the tree, and the morning before the day before we hunted there, two hunts, and then the morning we almost shot. What was its name?
Krusty.
Yeah, Krusty the clown.
Krusty the buck. Okay, so now we have Greg the buck, Krusty the buck.
Yep.
And there's since been 4 or 5 different. There's been Krusty 2, Krusty 3. Anyway.
Hunter Chuck Charles.
So Mindy's looking at us where are you guys going with this?
It doesn't matter. Nobody wants to hear a linear story. At least that's not how my mind works. So the day before, we had Krusty come in, and he caught our wind and left. And then that afternoon, we had that really cool 140-inch 8-point coming down off the hill, and that was a cool buck.
That thing is big.
Yeah, and then we had a doe in the creek, and that busted us. But we go back in the next morning. We're in there, and we weren't in there very long, and this buck just comes walking down the creek and
in the water.
It was
cool.
Yeah, walks down the water, and then thankfully this happened. Mike grabs his bow and pulls it off, and his broadhead caught on one of the poison ivy vines and bounced it off the rest. And so when he was moving it, it went twing, and that deer looks directly at us. We have it on film, looks right up at us. And then instead of continuing down the creek, he actually jumps up on the little ledge and gives a way better shot and walks out. Mike stops it, shoots the deer, good shot, runs away. And we're, high-fiving and whatever. And he calls Bill, tells Bill that he shot a buck. I don't remember if I called or texted you, but you were get a ton of cutaways, of everything that goes into it. And so we filmed some cutaways or whatever. And while we're filming cutaways, Mike turns and goes, "Oh, there's another buck right there." And I go to film it. And he's like, "No, give me the camera." So I slide the camera around the tree. I grab my bow, and I never even saw the deer because it's behind my line of vision, behind the tree. And I go, "What is it?" And he goes, "It's a 10." I go, "Is it mature?" And he goes, "Yes." I'm like, "Okay." So I drew back, and I was like, "Are you on him?" And he goes, "Yes." And I was like, "All right." Bap, stopped him, shot him. It was 10 minutes. and we had 2 deer on the
Yeah,
ground.
except your buck, you hard shoot, and this thing like runs maybe 10, 15 feet,
yeah.
and then just falls over right underneath the tree.
Yeah, and then it ran just behind the tree for Mike, and I think he thought it ran away.
Right.
And I was like, "Are you on it?" He goes, "Where is it?" I was like,
And then he falls back into the frame.
falls back into the frame. And you can't see it on the video because he was pretty wide on that shot. But that deer was like a fire hose out the other side.
Oh,
of him.
Yeah. Smoked him.
Man,
Smoked them both.
Yeah. So, that was. I think that was the first cameraman hunter double up on Midwest Whitetail.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Have we had another one? We've been real close on public land numerous times.
Yeah.
But
we made history that day.
Yeah.
You and Mike.
Anyway, it's about lunchtime. We should probably wrap this up.
Sorry for all of the randomness.
We're not just going to sit here and BS the entire ATA show. We need to probably actually do
Sam probably
some
needs
work.
to.
You've probably got
do a
some
little
people
work.
and
there's a couple more people I got to go wave at them and then and keep moving.
And the robot's coming back out, too.
Oh, yeah.
So.
We got okay, guys. We got to go. We got to
go.
get to this robot. It's amazing. It's once in a lifetime. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks, guys.